Hi guys! Today I actually wanted to talk about my diagnosis with MS. I'm hoping that I can tell my story in the most real, honest, realistic way possible. If you're watching this, you are either a close family member or a friend who hasn't quite heard the entire story and is here to support me in any way you can. Or if you are a stranger from the internet, I hope that it's not because you have just been diagnosed or a loved one has been diagnosed or you're concerned that you're going to be diagnosed with MS. But if that is the case, I will do whatever I can to help you understand how my journey has been just over the last month and a half, and hopefully you can take something from it. So, where to start? I think what I'm going to do is I will be posting the time signatures, is that the word? Down in the description below, so that if you are looking for what symptoms I had, how my procedures went, like the lumbar puncture, the MRIs, all of that. If you're looking for the personal stuff, how I'm feeling, you can just go down, click on the timestamp, get to where you want in this video. I think that that may help some of you out that are looking to learn more about MS instead of having to watch my entire story. But if you are here for me, for my story, I'm just going to start at the beginning, and hopefully this video isn't too long. Let's start 3 years ago, because y'all know by now that I am diagnosed with MS, so you know the outcome of the story. So about 3 years ago, I had just started my job at Four Seasons apartment complex. So my right toe, big toe, the very tip of it was numb. And just suddenly, it was one night while I was watching TV, and over the next 2-3 weeks, that numbness in the tip of my toe had gone from the tip of my toe all the way up my leg, my right leg only. It progressed, but it progressed over 3 weeks, so it was still pretty quick. At first, when it was just my foot, I thought something's wrong. I Googled a bunch of stuff. I was putting my feet in hot water every night. I don't remember why that was, but I was trying to fix this numb foot that I had. I didn't know what was happening. By the time I actually started to get concerned, the numbness was all the way up into my lower back. So while I was doing dishes, I would lean over and I could feel that my back was numb. And that was really strange. It was starting to become concerning. I was obviously in contact with my friends, my family, my parents, trying to figure out what I should do. It sounded to me like a pinched nerve, which I'm no doctor, but that's what it seemed like. So what I did was went to a chiropractor. So the chiropractor got me in, did some kind of voodoo magic, digging his elbow into the back of my hip, saying that I had maybe a pinched nerve, maybe a cluster of nerves that had been tangled inside my hip, inside the bone, inside the joint. I don't really know. And I went to him probably 4 times. But slowly it had been starting to get better over the next month. So I figured things were going in the right direction. The numbness in my leg has completely gone away since then. I thought the chiropractor fixed it. After that, whenever I exercised, I would get tingling down the backs of my legs. It wouldn't last for long, but I would get these tingles every time I started running. It was so mild that I didn't really care. I was actually thinking that it was sciatica. All right, fast forward to the morning after we hiked Bryce Canyon. We were driving home. These 2 fingers on my left hand were numb. They were tingling. And I'm thinking maybe I pinched a nerve in my shoulder, you know? For the next 3 days, so this happened really quickly, the numbness went from these 2 fingers to my entire body. Both sides of my body. Legs were a little bit less numb than the rest of my body, but they were still very tingly. My chest, my stomach, my back, both arms, both hands, everything from the neck down was numb. I think by the 2nd or 3rd day I had called to make a doctor's appointment with my primary care physician. On Friday I had an appointment. However, Come Thursday morning, I was really nervous. This had gotten a lot worse, and I just really wanted to get in to see the doctor. So instead of going to see my primary care physician, I opted to see the other doctor in the practice just so that I could get in on Thursday. What he told me was not what I wanted to hear. The conclusion that he decided to come to was that because it was not only on one side of my body or the other, it couldn't be a slipped disc. It isn't something wrong with my spine. It is likely neurological. I went out to the car, I called my insurance because he had just scheduled an MRI and I was really concerned about cost. But then I had to take a little while to cry because that was so scary to me to hear that it was neurological. The brain is not something you want to mess with. So I was scared. I was really scared, and Dan sat there and cried with me a little bit, let me cry, and then I went back to work. The MRI was scheduled for next Wednesday. This was Thursday. I started to panic because it had only been 3 days and I was gonna have to wait almost another week in order to get this MRI. So they bumped me up to Monday morning. So at this point, I'm going to talk about my first MRI that I had. This was just of the brain. They didn't do contrast. If you don't know what that is, it's where they inject dye into your IV so that they can see whether or not the spots light up on your brain scan. But at this point, that wasn't in the cards. So my primary care physician had referred me to this MRI, and he'd also referred me to a neurologist even before he got the MRI back, just because he wanted to make sure that I got in to see the neurologist. I was obviously very nervous. I don't have a lot of medical issues. I'm claustrophobic. I didn't know what to expect out of a medical procedure. It was super early in the morning and I took a anti-anxiety medication. I took half of a pill, which my mother had advised me not to take the other half unless I still felt anxious, but I got to the hospital and I was still anxious, so I took the other half. At this point, we are now in the midst of COVID. We have been for quite some time, but Utah hadn't become super strict on masks yet. We were actually starting to see lower numbers of cases. So Dan was able to come with me. We obviously wore our masks. They took me back into a room with a bunch of computers. They let Dan sit in this little smaller waiting room within the radiology department. I took off everything that I had. I was able to wear my own clothes, so I just wore leggings. I figured my feet might be cold, so I put on some really cute fuzzy cat socks my friend Maddie had just given me. I wore something super comfortable, not too tight, leggings and like a long sleeve black tee. I didn't want to be hot, but I get cold really easy, so I just made sure that I was at least covered. I didn't wear any makeup, I didn't wear my contacts. I just wore my hair in a low ponytail, which turned out to be great, by the way. And they took me into a dressing area. I didn't wear a bra, you have to take your bra off. So I wore my bra there, but I took it off when I got into the dressing area. They took me into the MRI room. So it's a big white machine. It's like a donut, but long, yeah. Not a CT machine. A CT scanner is a donut, and this one's like a long donut. And they lay you down on the table. He made sure I was super comfortable. He warned me about how loud it was going to be. They told me about how long it was going to be. This one only lasted about 15 to 20 minutes. And then they do put a cage, like a white cage over your head, which definitely contributed to the claustrophobia because I don't really feel like it's that enclosed before they put the cage over your head. But they do give you headphones to help with the anxiety from how much noise the machine creates. And I asked them to play Taylor Swift. They do have like a Pandora station going, so it's just a bunch of different songs that are related to what you choose. And I ended up being super relaxed, but I think that was because of the anti-anxiety medication. I actually got results back that day. I came back to my house and I was actually just so tired from the anti-anxiety medication that I took about a 3-hour nap. And then I got up and I went to work. There were a couple of spots on my brain, as well as one on the very bottom of my brain, top of my spine. At this point, the neurologist did call me. I got an appointment with him set up just 2 days later. So this was all really quick. The neurologist did go over the brain scan with me, showed me the spots, explained what MS was because that's kind of what it was looking like at this point, but said it could also be from trauma, it could be migraines or headaches, or it could be vasculitis. He ruled out pretty much the other 3 at this point. I was preparing for MS pretty much from this point on. I had been told that it may be MS before this as well, but I didn't really consider it until this point. What he decided to do was to get more MRIs and get a lumbar puncture, which I was super not excited about. I already wasn't excited about having more MRIs, and I definitely did not want a lumbar puncture. The MRIs happened the week after I met with the neurologist, and they actually ended up doing all 4 MRIs at the same time. Unfortunately, Dan was working, so my dad took me into the hospital, and at this point, the COVID cases had started to rise in Utah, and they are not allowing visitors anymore. My neurologist had actually prescribed me at this point more anti-anxiety medication so that I could get through these procedures. So I did take another Xanax, is what it was, before I went into this MRI, but my dad was stopped at the door. He could not come in with me, and I started to panic. So I took the other half. You guys are gonna think that I'm a drug addict by the end of this, but I promise I'm not. I just had this medication for my procedures, and I really think I needed it. It was very helpful for me. But I had to go in by myself. I took a deep breath and I said, okay, I can do this. I will be brave today. I went in to get these other 4 MRIs, and I say 4 because it was all one MRI, but I believe they did another brain scan with and without contrast, and then a spine MRI with and without contrast. So at this point they had to put an IV in, which I am also not good with. I can handle needles and shots, but I do not like IVs or getting my blood drawn. They put me back into the MRI machine. This time I asked for John Mayer, and they played John Mayer, and I actually fell asleep. And I think that's because I took a Xanax before. They actually do have this little mirror too. I don't know, like you're laying on your back, but they have a mirror that kind of like makes it so you can see out towards your feet. And I think it's for people with claustrophobia because it really does make you feel like you're not as enclosed as you really are. I think it lasted like an hour. It went by super fast because I wasn't really conscious. The next week I had my spinal tap or my lumbar puncture. This was a procedure that I was terrified of. If you don't know what it is, it's kind of like an epidural where they stick a giant needle in your back, except for instead of injecting medications so that you can give birth to a baby, they take spinal fluid out of your spine. That just sounds scary. At this point, I was determined to have Dan with me. I knew he probably couldn't be in the room when the procedure was happening, but I just really wanted him to be with me in the hospital. You do have to sit in the hospital for 2 hours after the procedure laying flat on your back, and I wanted him there. When I scheduled the appointment, they did talk to me about having visitors there, which wasn't allowed, but they said if you were on any medication where you couldn't drive, you could have one person there with you, which I still think probably was iffy, but I was taking a Xanax before I had this procedure, and I used that as an excuse to get down in, which could be a bad thing, but I was terrified. We both wore masks. We got up to the entrance where they take your temperature at the door of the hospital, and they were like, oh, we don't allow visitors, and I was like, oh, so I'm on a medication, I'm on Xanax where I can't drive, so I need someone with me. And they were like, well, I guess if the doctor says that he can be there, it's fine. So he got in with me. But the doctor didn't have any issue with it. They took me back into the recovery room area where there's just a bunch of different small rooms with curtains. There was no other patients back there. It was at like 6 in the morning. He was there while they had to put my IV in. Unfortunately, because of the way that you are laying during your lumbar puncture, you have to lay like this with your head on your arms. They don't like to put the IV in your elbow because you're going to be bending it. So they want to put it in your wrist or your hands. They did try, and the guy really did try his best, but they couldn't get it, and it was so painful. I don't like IVs, like I mentioned, and he had it in this wrist, and he kept moving the needle around and digging it and trying to get the vein, and I was like, please stop. They tried here, they tried this hand, this wrist, they tried like 4 or 5 places, and finally they were like, nope, we're just gonna put it in your elbow. What is it, an elbow pit? I didn't like the idea of the fact that it was going to be bending. That's why I don't like IVs, is because I can like feel it. But at this point I didn't care because they had hurt me so bad poking on the needles in my hands. They got me ready for my procedure. Dan had mentioned that he is going into PA school, so when they were rolling me out, the nurse actually asked if he would like to come into the room and see the procedure being done, which was so cool. So he actually got to be there the entire time. They actually put you in while they're doing the lumbar puncture so that they can have the scan of your spine as they're putting the needle in, so they can see exactly where they're putting the needle in and drawing the spinal fluid out. They laid me on my stomach, I put my arms like this. IV was not super comfortable, but it is what it is. They numbed it. I did feel a little pinch when they put the lidocaine in, and then after that, I didn't feel anything, which is crazy. It's great, but it's crazy. I didn't feel anything. It only took about 5 minutes. Afterwards, they carefully rolled me back onto the bed. Now you have to lay on your back for, like I said, at least 2 hours right after the procedure, but then they suggest laying down for the next 24 hours as well. Because if the hole in your spine that they poke doesn't heal, it can leak and it will cause a spinal headache. So I went back to the recovery room. Dan was there the whole time. I think he played Pokemon on his Switch because I just fell asleep. That Xanax kicked in and I fell asleep for the entire 2 hours. They came back in, they let me rest. They helped me sit up, took my IV out, did all the finalized paperwork, and I went home. So I laid on my back the entire day. I got up to go to the bathroom. You're not completely immobile, but your back does hurt, and it's just wise for you to lay down so you don't get a spinal headache. So the next morning I woke up, I went to work, everything was fine. Apparently, with an epidural, it's about a 50-50 chance that you're going to get a spinal headache. With a spinal tap, there's only like a 2 to 3% chance you get a spinal headache, and that ended up being me. I was at 2%. Around 5 p.m. the day after my spinal tap, I started to get a headache. And I was a little bit concerned that this is what it was because it didn't feel like my normal headaches. It felt very pressurized. It only happened when I was standing or sitting. When I laid down, I went home after work and I laid down and I was fine. We went to the park. Dan wanted to play tennis and I didn't play with him, but I was tossing him some tennis balls and I was standing there and I was like, oh my gosh, my head is starting to really hurt. So we went home, I laid down, I watched a movie, I was fine. So the next morning I woke up, I felt great. My dad called me, he's like, how are you feeling? Is your headache better? I said, yeah, I feel fantastic. That didn't last long. About an hour later, that headache started to come back. It was not great. And it hit about 3 p.m. in the afternoon. I took my lunch break, but I just stayed in my office. And I thought, well, if it feels better when I lay down, I'll just lay on the ground in my office. It actually got massively worse. I tried to sit up and the entire world was spinning. Like the pressure, it felt like my head was a balloon about to pop. And my vision started to go because the pain was so bad. I called the hospital trying to speak with the doctor who did the spinal tap, but I couldn't navigate my way to speaking to him. So I tried to call my neurologist to see what he would suggest. He could try and schedule me a blood patch, which is what takes care of that, but it could take a couple days if he tries to schedule it. Or I could just go into the emergency room and they would do it for me. So at this point, I've already reached my out-of-pocket max with my insurance. So I'm like, what the heck? Let's go to the emergency room. It's now about 24 hours after my headache began. I went to the emergency room and they wouldn't let my dad in, of course. Dan was at work, so I had to do it by myself. It's gonna get dark outside. I didn't plan this out very well. I will mention that right before I got to the emergency room, when I was on the phone with my neurologist about whether or not I should go to have the blood patch done, he actually gave me my diagnosis. So the first person that I really told about my diagnosis was the ER doctor, and he was like, wait, so do you have MS? I know they were doing the spinal tap because they were trying to figure it out, and I was like, yeah, I just got my diagnosis an hour ago. I started to cry. Yeah, he was the kindest person, and he was so apologetic, and he let me cry for a while. The anesthesiologist was going to come in and give me a blood patch. Now, a blood patch, so what they do is they take blood out of your arm and they put it in your back, right where they did the spinal tap. And that blood will go in and it will clot and it will heal the hole in my spine. So crazy. Pretty much witchcraft. The nurses were all so accommodating, so nice. Everyone kind of knew my situation, knew my story at this point. They knew I was just diagnosed, they knew I was upset, and they were all so incredible. And honestly, it turned out to be the best ER experience that it could have been. So they did the blood patch. It was nerve-wracking. I had to lean forward on a tray with like a pillow underneath so that I had my back super arched, and he numbed the area. I felt him poking the needle into my spine, and it wasn't painful, but man, it is the weirdest feeling. So crazy. After that, I didn't feel anything. They took the blood out of my arm right when he said to, because it needs to be fresh, and the phlebotomist handed it over to the anesthesiologist, and he injected it right into my back. And he did it slowly. There was, I think, 20 cc's, he said, of blood. And he's like, yeah, so just tell me when it's really sore. And I don't know if it's the way I was hunched over or like the lidocaine, but I couldn't really feel any soreness. So I was like, it's not sore. And they got done with the blood and they're like, okay, well, we're done. And then he lifted me up, not lift me up, like straightened my back so that he could lay me down on the table. And all of a sudden, as soon as my back straightened, I could feel all that soreness that he was talking about. And my head also was spinning because I had this spinal headache, and I just kind of like flopped onto the table. He like leaned me back and he's like, okay, so you have to lay down for about 30 minutes and then your headache will be gone. Just like that. After that, they sat me up really slowly. My back was still really sore, like really sore. And I sat up and my headache was gone. And one of the nurses was so sweet. She actually came in and asked me if it would be okay if one of the other nurses came to talk to me, because he too had just been diagnosed with MS about 6 months before. He came in and he gave me all the education that he had, what medications he was on, what his experience was like. One of the most profound things that he told me was, I know that everyone's going to tell you like it's going to be okay, everything will be fine, and it's really nice of them to say that, but you don't know if it's going to be okay. And that was so real to me, because that's exactly how I had been feeling over the last few weeks. And he understood that. He gave me a ton of recipes. He wrote down all of his resources for me, and it was so cool. Like I said, it was the best ER experience I could have had. My primary care physician actually prescribed me with a small dose steroid. That didn't do anything. My entire body was still numb, nothing changed. My neurologist then prescribed me 3 days of high dose steroids. I think it was 1,000 milligrams a day. That helped. So that took away all the numbness in my entire body. My chest and my stomach were still very numb for a few days, but it slowly went away. My arms and my fingers were still numb by the end of the steroids, and I was concerned, but my doctor said no more steroids. It's not gonna help you. So at this point, we just have to let the symptoms go away. At this point, it's been a month probably since I've been on steroids, and everything is back to normal except for the tips of these 3 fingers, but I have full function in my hands. I didn't ever lose the ability to move, but the numbness was pretty painful, especially my hands when I would try to write or type, and that's what I do at work. So that was really frustrating. The way that MS works, my autoimmune system is attacking the myelin sheath, which is the outer covering of my nerves, and it's damaging that myelin sheath, so now the nerves are exposed, and that's what those little spots end up showing on your MRI, are the damaged parts of your nerves and your myelin sheath. So the myelin sheath will heal itself, however, it depends on how much damage was done to your nerves during the time where they were exposed, and if that is permanent or not. The relapses will happen, and the only thing to alleviate the symptoms during those times is steroids, but the medication that they put you on long term for MS is helping the relapses to slow down, so you don't have as many, they're not as bad, it's trying to slow down the disease. Because this is a chronic illness, it's not going to go away. And as far as I'm aware, if I don't take medication, it's going to get a heck of a lot worse. And I could end up losing my mobility. I could be disabled, which is the scary part of MS. And that's what the nurse was talking about at the emergency room, is you just don't know if it's going to be okay. You really hope so. Medication has come a long way in the last little while, especially for MS. And that's really good news, because before, MS was pretty much a wheelchair sentence. I'm doing everything that I can myself to stay healthy and active. I do weight training, I do cardio, I'm going to get back into yoga, I'm going tomorrow morning. I do whatever I can to stay active. So I just met with my neurologist on Thursday. It's Saturday today, and it's about to be Sunday by the time I'm done with this, but he is going to put me on a oral medication. There's 3 different options. You can do injections, where you stab yourself with a needle every day. I opted out of that real quick. You can do oral medication, so taking a pill every single day, sometimes twice a day, or you can do infusions, where every 3 or 6 months you go in and you get an IV and you get medication through your IV, and that's it. And my doctor actually said that that's the one that he suggests to everyone, because you go in every 6 months and you're done. A lot of insurance doesn't approve that immediately, so you actually have to try one of the other options first. There's a lot of nasty symptoms that come along with these medications. With mine specifically, it's called Tecfidera. However, I'm going on a slightly different version of Tecfidera that is newer. It just came out, and it's called Vumerity. Yeah, Vumerity. The side effects with Vumerity or Tecfidera are a lot of flushing. So as soon as you take it, I guess your skin gets really hot and red and itchy, and it goes away, but you take it twice a day. So I don't know how long it's gonna last. I don't even know if I'll react the same way. Some people do. I guess you can take like an aspirin to help relieve that symptom, which is funny because you take a medication to do this and then you have to take more medications and all sorts of crazy stuff. Speaking of, after I got off of my steroids, so I had 3 days of high-dose steroids and they didn't taper me off, and I actually got really sick. I had extreme fatigue, stomach issues, headaches, not good. So if you ever go on steroids and you're concerned about yourself reacting that way, you can ask to have them tapered. My doctor now said that because I reacted that way, I will be doing a tapering dosage from now on. If I ever have a relapse, if I ever have to go on steroids again, I will be tapered off of them. I still have to go in and get my blood drawn every 2 months as of right now, because what it does is, I guess, your blood cell count lowers, and then when you first go on the medication, and then it should rise back up. But if it doesn't, you are susceptible to brain infection, which is just great. You have to be monitored, you have to have your bloods. I had my blood drawn on Thursday. I have to have my blood drawn again in 2 months, 2 months after that, 2 months after that. And then I have to have my blood drawn every 6 months for the rest of forever, as long as I'm on that medication. So as far as support goes, I have had the most incredible amount of support one could ask for. I can't even mention how many people have called, texted, Facebook messaged. I mean, it's been incredible. And my friends and family have been absolutely amazing throughout this entire process. I did join a couple of Facebook groups as well, one women with MS and one just MS. It has been kind of scary, like any Facebook groups, because you see the worst of the symptoms and the worst of the treatments and all of that, but also very interesting and very informative. And it's really sad to see how bad some people are. So my neurologist has diagnosed me with RRMS. It is the most mild form of MS there is. It's relapse remitting MS, which means that eventually I'll have a relapse, but we're hoping with the medication that doesn't happen as often. But it can progress to the other types or the other stages of MS. We hope that that doesn't happen. Some people go their entire lives in that first stage and they're fine. But every single person is different. So depending on where the spots are in your brain or on your spine, your symptoms are going to be different. The progression is going to be different. I am so grateful that as of right now, I can walk, I can run, I can exercise. I don't have any pain necessarily. I have a lot of fatigue. Fatigue has been really difficult to deal with. I do still have numbness in my fingers, but I mean, it's the tips of my 3 fingers. There is a lot worse that could happen. There are a lot of people that live with constant pain in their joints, in their legs, in their arms. There are countless symptoms and issues that people have that are so much worse than mine, and I'm so grateful for it. I'm going to do everything that I can to help myself, make sure that I am feeling every single emotion that I can, making sure to allow space for sadness, for grief, for anxiety, but also being able to move on from that and being able to see every day as an opportunity to strengthen my muscles, to go for a run, because not just me, but anyone, we don't know when that's going to be taken away from us. We have no idea if we're going to get in a car accident, heaven forbid, and become paralyzed. That was extremely negative, but it's true. And that's the same with MS. It's extremely devastating to get this diagnosis. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But I'm hoping that it acts as a motivator for me. I already was super motivated to live life to its fullest. You can ask my friends and family. I have always wanted to travel, to experience the world, to meet new people, to hear stories, to get new jobs, to be promoted, to exercise, to, you know, sit on the couch and enjoy peanut butter and chocolate chips and watch a movie. Every little experience that I have, I consider an opportunity to experience it. And I love those things. I love those moments. And I'm hoping that this only motivates me more to live life to its fullest. Yeah. I didn't mean to get on a soapbox, but I hope that this at least helps someone understand how the process may go for your diagnosis. I was extremely lucky to be able to be diagnosed so quickly. I didn't have to wait a long time to get into any doctor's appointments, and that's not always the case. So I really hope that your journey goes smoothly if you are in that limbo of not knowing if your symptoms could be MS. If you are friends or family watching this, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support. Just watching this, it means so much to me that you came here, you wanted to hear my story. I will probably do an update, I'm assuming. I don't know if it will be like a consistent thing. Maybe after a while I'll just check in with you guys and let you know how I'm doing. But it is very dark outside now. The lighting is probably gonna be all sorts of crazy in this video, but I hope that you guys still enjoyed it. It's going to be a wild ride. We'll see how it goes. Bye guys.